Annalisa, can you do me a favor? Could you do the voice for this podcast?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Welcome, everybody, to the Young Catholics Leaders podcast. And we are joined now by Malcolm Zara. I'm Annalisa Burgos, and it's my pleasure to be with you today, Malcolm.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Did I do that right? Did I say the title correctly?
In control. We're up again, we're dancing in the love we know.
Aloha and welcome everybody to the Young Catholic Leaders podcast, in which we explore the intersection of faith and professional life. Today, we have wisdom being shared through Annalisa Burgos. Thank you so much for joining us. Annalisa has been a news anchor and a journalist from around the world and now is a resident here in Hawaii, serving on Hawaii News Now. So we'll talk more about where you can find her. But thank you so much, Annalisa, for joining us.
Oh, so good to be with you, Malcolm. I love talking to young people, so I believe in the mission that you guys have.
I think I'm still young, so that still counts, right?
I don't know. What's the cutoff? I'm not young anymore.
Doesn't matter. If you're young at heart, if you're
Yes.
young in age, this podcast is for you. And we have a lot of exciting things coming up. We're going to talk about your career as a journalist from around the world, from LA to New York to Singapore to the Philippines. Talk about how your faith influenced some of the decision making and some of the challenges that come through the work. And if there's any advice for any young professionals who want to explore journalism, or at the very least is interested in what this world entails.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So let's jump into it. I want to just ask you, how did you grow up? Did you think you were going to be a journalist, a news anchor? Did you want to be on TV? Like, what was it what pushed you into the career, into this career?
Honestly, I think I was always a very curious child, and I always asked a lot of questions. So that can be annoying to people, but I found that the perfect profession for someone who's inquisitive, who questions things, who wants to know how things work, who wants to meet all kinds of people, journalism is a perfect profession because it kind of gives you this pass to talk to anybody. And opens doors to anybody, like whether you are talking to someone homeless on the street or to a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You can talk to anyone if you just say, hey, I'm a journalist, I'm covering this.
Yeah.
Free press is awesome.
Yeah. So if you love questioning people, then maybe this is the career for you.
It is. If there's any parents out there, if your kids are annoyingly inquisitive and wanting to know what the reason is for anything out there, or if they're extroverted and have kind of this interest in meeting so many different people and learning so many different types of things, this is a great profession for that person.
Yeah. Your career has taken you around the world. What were some of the places, your favorite places that you've worked in?
Oh my God, so many. That's, you know how travel really helps you discover who you are, right? Yeah. So I'm originally from LA, so I'll just give you a little bit of background. I'm originally from LA, born and raised. My parents are Filipino, and they immigrated to America separately and met in LA. And they were part of that mass immigration of Filipinos. You know, they were looking for a lot of nurses and teachers, so they were part of that migration period. And so I grew up there. I loved it. I again, learned who I was as far as a member of the Filipino community, and was very active in that, very active in my church. Filipinos are very hardcore Catholic. So I was raised in the church. We would walk. My parish was right a block over. So we would go to mass like every Sunday. I was in the school choir, the church choir. Yeah. So I sang at mass every Sunday. I also was, a lecturer or a reader?
Lector.
Lector. Yeah. So I would read because I had a very good voice already at that age, when I was in elementary school. So I was very active, and I would go to prayer meetings with young adults. So it kind of shaped how I was in my youth. And then when I went to college, and then I went to graduate school in New York, that's how I ended up moving to New York. And I just started, following the dream, living the dream. And the whole time, I know this is kind of a faith-focused podcast, so I wanted to reflect again on how that helped me. During my time in LA, I was thinking, give me a sign, God, if I need to change my life and move. I really want to move to New York. I really want to go to graduate school. And I only applied to one graduate school. It was Columbia University, the top of, of the industry.
Yeah.
They give out the Pulitzer Prizes. And I said, I'm going to apply for this. I couldn't afford it too. So don't get me wrong. I'm like not from a rich background. So I said, if I can get into this school, I will move to New York and I will start my career. And I was blessed and I was able to go.
That's awesome.
And that started off my career. I went to New York, lived there for several years. I worked for different companies, did amazing stories. And then I met my husband in New York. We moved to Singapore for his job, actually, and then I was able to get a job in Singapore. The beauty of journalism is that it's writing, it's reporting, and you can do it anywhere in the world. So I was able to move to these different places and, do my passion, do what I love best. And every step of the way, it was like something clicked. Like I got the opportunity. Right? And Philippines after Singapore, and finally here in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where does Hawaii rank in your top destinations? Right?
Honestly, I love Hawaii.
Yeah.
I think at my age now, and I'm not going to give away my age, but you can kind of calculate based on where I've lived and how long I've been in this business. But I was ready to be in a place that had more, I guess, peace and calm. Because
New York,
think of
and
all the
LA.
cities I've been in, right? It's all hectic, crazy cities.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a city girl. So LA, New York, Singapore, Manila. I mean, these are very chaotic cities with very, very passionate, very, big stories to tell, right? And big news. So I covered presidents, I covered politics, businesses. I was in New York during the crash, the recession, and it was just covering all these major events in history. It kind of takes a toll on you. You know what I mean? Like you're talking to people who have lost everything. Like if you want to talk about recession, right? Like in the 2008 recession, people lost everything. People were committing suicides because of everything they've lost. It takes a toll on the journalist who's trying to share these stories, but they're so important.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So, and back then, no one really talked about mental health. Yeah. I don't know if you know, right? Yeah. Do you remember that? Like back in the day, you're raised by Filipinos that are like, just get through it. You can do it, What do they say in America? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah. Mental illness or mental health was not something you spoke about, Now, the kids these days, I feel like they're much more aware. I don't know if it's affected the numbers. I think people are just much more aware of it, and they try to make a effort to take care of themselves for their mental health, but it's still tough, right?
Yeah.
It's still a tough time.
Yeah, I want to hit on that definitely in just a bit, but just going back to the whole journalism trajectory here, right? And it's for anyone, you've seen massive changes because now it was just turn on the news and that's where the stories are. But then with social media and with the internet, like you have all these different sources for news and stories. How have you seen that change throughout your career?
It's crazy. So Malcolm, I have a funny story. So I'll tell you the story. Yes, I grew up in a world where you had the trusted anchor. Connie Chung was the Asian leader. She's actually promoting her memoir these days, and it's so interesting to see that because I grew up in that era as well. Of wanting to be that anchor that people trusted and listened to, and so I grew up in that, and then I was already working in the field around 2004 when social media just started to get invented, right? Like before that, there was like no YouTube or no Facebook. But around the time when my career was starting to take off, I remember I was working at Forbes, and Forbes is known for interviewing, CEOs and entrepreneurs and business people. So one of my producers actually told me like, hey, there's this young guy that just started this website where all these college students can go on and put their profiles and they can all connect. I think you should interview this guy. And I'm like, in my head thinking, who cares about this website? I mean, I came from the era of Friendster. Do you guys remember Friendster?
Yeah.
And that died, right?
Yeah.
So, or MySpace, right? And so I thought, okay, it's one of those. But I took the interview. I mean, he was not a very nice person.
Really?
He was just a little pompous, like, kind of those cocky young people.
So how the movie portrayed him, right?
Oh my gosh. To the T.
Yeah.
I feel like he was that. Yeah. So we're talking about Mark Zuckerberg, of course, who founded Facebook. But when I met him, he was, again, just had quit Harvard and had moved to the Silicon Valley. And he just came off very, cocky. And I thought to myself, oh, who's this dude? He's just like another one of those .com people. But look at it now. Facebook essentially, controls every conversation in the world. And it's crazy to see that, right? Yeah. From having, just to backtrack, what I love about journalism is that it is about fact checking. It's about verification. Things are not just someone's opinion, right? There's many layers of editing and vetting and just making sure that what you are saying is accurate, right? It's all about, this is truth, this is accuracy. But with the advent of social media, everyone just thought they could be that person, that
everyone's got
true.
A platform,
Yes, and so to me as a journalist, I just felt, oh my gosh, this is the demise of my industry. Yeah. Because, and as you see, people started calling fake news because it didn't agree with whatever their personal opinions are. And because social media is not regulated, no one can, if you're not media, if you don't have media literacy, or you don't have that knowledge of how to distinguish what's real or not, or fact or fiction, then you're living in an alternate universe, and it's really hard, and we know that. Yeah. And it's crazy to see it happen all over the world and reaching to the highest levels of government. And I don't want to, that's such a whole other conversation, right? When you talk about government and politics and how misinformation and disinformation has affected our democratic systems, it's just, oh my gosh, it's just insane. So when you ask how I feel about that, I mean, I honestly am sad. Yeah. Maria Ressa is a good friend of mine. And when I knew her, she was just like a regular journalist like the rest of us. And in case you don't know who Maria Ressa is, she won the Pulitzer also. And she, again, was a woman who, not Pulitzer, so Nobel Peace Prize. And she was targeted because of some of the reports that she had done, her company Rappler had done about President Duterte, right, and his war on drugs. And for people who are listening and watching and who don't know the story, go ahead and research that. There's a lot about that. But because of that, it kind of people started questioning reality, I think. And so as a journalist, I felt like, how can we do our jobs with honor and with integrity when people can't even trust the information we're presenting? So it's a dilemma. And I think that's why people who stay in this business believe in it. But a lot of people have left because it's just so taxing and so mentally exhausting. You get discouraged, right? When you feel like you're doing, let's make this clear. People don't do journalism for money. It is not a money-making industry. So if anyone is out there interested in being a journalist or being a reporter, you're not driven by, money. You're driven by this purpose of being a voice for people, being a voice, being a light for, dark situations in the world, kind of raising awareness so that people have this better, can be better citizens, better people, right? So that's why people join this business. And so I think it's sad because of social media, those lines have suddenly blurred and people don't know, how to distinguish this is the fact and this is the fiction. So that's the constant struggle.
Yeah, I love that, because what you're sharing essentially is, as a journalist, it's a public service, right? You are serving the people. And you can draw a lot of parallels through our faith and in ministry, right? In a way, it's a ministry that you're providing for the common people, for society, and making sure that they have the truth and they can see what's actually going on, who they can trust is a very big deal. My mind was just going nuts because it kind of opened up my eyes to what is it that you do and what you provide for us, and why we should really do our job in vetting and studying the story just a little bit more. Or that joke, people just read the headlines and they make a decision off of that.
Yeah.
But let's touch upon that, right? It can be very demanding. It's how do you stay sane, right, and grounded throughout this field?
Am I, Malcolm? I don't know. That's
lots of coffee. Right?
Yes, thank you for the coffee, by the way. No, it's it's tough. It's a constant struggle, I think. And again, if we want to go back and refer to faith, that's what drives me. It's like, again, what is my why? You know how nowadays people are always saying, think about what is your purpose? What is your why? I feel like that's like a buzz phrase right now. And it's true. In this business, you're not getting a lot of money. You're not respected anymore, like the way that Walter Cronkite and like Connie Chung were, right? It's like, it's not like that anymore. If anything, people are just much more, fake news, you have an agenda, you have a thing, it's like, we're bullied. It's just different now in this industry nowadays. And so I have to reflect, there's a higher purpose here. If I don't tell this story, then, nothing will change. There's kind of, I want to explain that sometimes people think there's an agenda there. And maybe for certain people there are, right? Like you can't discount that. It is still a profit-based business. Like, these companies that own mainstream media still need to make money, right? So I don't want to discount that, but the fact is it is individual. Each person is driven individually. So for me personally, it's like, yes, I have these struggles, but I think to myself, if I can reach one person with this story and change their lives and, prevent someone from, say, I keep thinking about suicide because it's Suicide Prevention Month, and it's like top of my mind right now. I just talked to someone right now who was telling me we have an epidemic here in Hawaii. So that's an example of me as a journalist learning these statistics and learning these things, and I'm like, I need to share this. Like people need to know that this is something that's happening in our community, and we need to do something about it. But it's hard because no one wants to talk about suicide openly because you don't want to glorify it. You don't want to give people ideas. But at the same time, it is a very real problem in our community. Another thing is, runaways and domestic violence. I mean, as we see in Waianae, for example, we're seeing a lot of cases that are turned into violent shootings. So while people may look at the news and be like, oh, well, why are they always so negative? Why are they always covering these, shootings and these, victim situations? I agree. I don't really want to cover negative news, but you have to think of it in a way like if shedding a light on something like this prevents something in the future for someone, maybe someone's watching it or hears about it and they're like, why? We need to do something about that.
Yeah. And what's the alternative? We don't say anything.
Yeah,
right?
and it just keeps happening.
Yeah, I love the phrasing that you use because the word catechesis means to shed light on. So, I mean, just
I didn't even know that. Yeah, there you go. So you're already enlightening me.
So, let's talk about the mental health aspect of it, right? And I want to ask, right? Obviously, when you were lecturing in your church community, that helped you with public speaking. But was there anything else growing up, being in a faith community that stays with you today, especially going through the hard stories or hard topics that you have to cover?
Well, it's personal prayer,
Yeah.
right? When you're raised in the Catholic
Yeah.
community, you're taught to pray and kind of have this personal connection with God. It's more structured, right? When you're young, you go to church, you do confession, you do all these things. But now that I'm older and I have kids of my own, I think I really want to share with them or teach them that it's your personal connection with God. Like if you are having that really difficult day where you are just like, why am I doing this? What is my purpose? Again, you're just kind of so frustrated with whatever you're going through. Just to take that few seconds, take a breath. You know how some of these techniques they teach you when you're trying to, again, for your mental health and mental fitness is just step back, take a minute, breathe. I add in a little prayer, right? You do those techniques. Some people do yoga. Some people do, they exercise. Maybe I'll just like close my eyes and I'll say a quick like, what am I doing?
God help me.
Help me. Or, or gratefulness, moments of being grateful, where sometimes I'll be in such a beautiful setting, like in the Philippines. That's happened a lot because in the Philippines, I was dealing with a lot of stories that were very emotionally difficult. And so I would be out in this beautiful, you know how the Philippines, beautiful vistas. And I think it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world, beautiful places in the world. So I'll be on this, beach and I'll just kind of look out and I'll be just grateful, right? To be able to see that, to be able to have the life I have, to be able to be there to see that, and do the work that I love. Not just that I love it, but that it has purpose. So those are the kind of ways I kind of, again, try to strike a balance, try to get through the difficult work that I do sometimes is take a moment, gratefulness, breathe, pray. And I wouldn't call myself, like people would look at me and not think of me as like a very like religious person, right? Stereotypical. But again, I want to thank you because I think being able to do this podcast allowed me to reflect. Like, because it's just instinctual to me, right? Like it's a reflex, but I don't really think about what I'm doing consciously. Until now, I'm like, I do that. I do that. Yeah.
And that's awesome. And I know, and that's kind of important for people to hear, right? Because everyone's stressed out. Everyone's in Hawaii is a peaceful place, but it's still pretty high energy, or at least we make it so. Right? So it's important to kind of step back and realize, hey, we're blessed, Let's touch upon the person who's either wanting to be a journalist or someone who's just interested in knowing more about it. And we're getting to the advice bit here. But I would assume when you're in these interviews and you're covering a hard story, right, you're kind of absorbing all that into your life. How do you unload it?
Gosh, I was just talking about this with someone. It's a skill. Like people who first get into this business, like when I first got into the business, I was like emotional, right? Like I would be interviewing someone and I'd start crying with them and I think you just develop this, you start to compartmentalize. I would imagine similar with like trauma medical people or military, right? When you're in situations that are very high emotions and high tension, you kind of develop this way of coping with it without internalizing. I mean, at some point, of course, you are still internalized, still affecting you. But the more, it's kind of, I don't want to say you're desensitized, but you just become used to having to speak to people in very traumatic situations or very controversial or tense situations, right? So, and I think the type of person who goes into this business and covers news, like at least hard breaking news, you have to have that stomach for it. Like, you kind of have to be able to develop that thick skin, because people are going to, again, especially now, people are going to yell at you and throw things at you or bully you or write, threats, death threats even sometimes, depending on your story. So again, it's that skill. It's a skill you just develop over time. If this is really something you feel passionate about, you just, again, find support. Then you find support amongst each other. Because obviously there's, I join organizations for journalists.
Yeah.
It's kind of like support groups.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, oh my gosh, I was in this war, right? Like I covered this. So one of the wars that I covered was a terrorism attack in the Philippines in the South. And, again, you go to these places and you're not ready to see what you see, but it's, again, like a reflex. Like you immediately think, okay, I have a job to do. I need to interview this person. I need to talk to this person. I need to film this. So you kind of just, again, focus on it like, this is the job.
This is the mission. This is the purpose. Yeah.
You just get it done, right?
Yeah.
Later, yes, you kind of have to figure out a way to process all of it, right? Like in the beginning, before we talked about mental health, before it was a thing, I would internalize that, right? I would just keep it.
Yeah.
People would say that's a skill, like to keep it. But then I developed high blood pressure.
Filipino thing to do, right? Maybe that's why Filipinos such have high blood and cholesterol.
Is. That's why we're nurses and caregivers, because you're under like these very stressful situations, and you just you have to just deal with it. I don't know. That's just how we're taught, right?
Yeah.
But look what happens to us. We have high blood pressure, hypertension.
Yeah. It's not the lechon, it's the stress.
It is for real. I think it's a real. What do they call it? The silent disease, because so many people suffer from it. And I really think it's because we internalize a lot of these very heavy things that happen to us. So I'm trying to deal with that. That's why I moved to Hawaii, because, I lived and worked in very high energy, high stress places. So that's why I came here, actually. So when my work in the Philippines was done, I thought, where can I go next? And my kids were already getting older. I'm like, okay, I need to put roots somewhere. I need to be in a place that is much more, better for me health-wise. And that's why Hawaii.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what a typical day looks like when you have to report to work early in the morning, get the brief on what the stories are? So all of that. What does a day in the life of a news anchor look like?
Okay, so it depends. So one day, if I'm a reporter for the day, because I also am a reporter, so a typical day would be, I would go in. Sometimes I have a story already that I've found, and I'll mention it in a meeting. We have like a morning meeting with the team, our editors, our group, because like I said, this is a vetted process. It's not just like, I'm just going to go report whatever I feel like.
What do we want to talk about today?
Yeah, no, it's not like that. It's very much like there's a team that determines, is this worth our time to go cover, to film, and to show people? Because, people say not a lot of people watch TV news anymore, but they actually do. Yeah. I was actually shocked, because I'll talk to people and I saw that story. And I'm like, wow, you watch the news? That's great. But it's not just on TV anymore. It's on your device. Yep. So I think that's how most people are consuming it anyway. So we'll go into this meeting. We'll say, okay, is this a story that I cover? So as you know, I'll give you an example. The nurses' strike is like a big story here right now. And so I've been talking to a lot of patient families who are affected by the nurses at Kapiolani being locked out. And it's a very emotional issue because, again, you're talking about a labor dispute, but that has spilled out and affected patients. And so one child died during the lockout. Obviously, the hospital says it's not related to the care, but the family is saying it is. So, it's a situation where the patients are in the middle of this labor dispute between the union and the hospital. And so I go in, I'm like, okay, this is my story. I tell, then the editors will say, okay, that's a top story. We have to cover that. And then I go with my photographer, my cameraman or camerawoman. And then
what time is all this happening?
So 10 o'clock's the meeting.
Okay.
And then once you get the green light, you go film starting at 10:30, 11. You get all your interviews, you film them all. Your camera person grabs all the kind of B-roll, like the video that goes with it. So whether it's nurses that are actually there or if we already have footage in-house that we've shot before. And then if it depends what time the shows are. So every day there's a 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock show, right? So you get assigned which show you're in. Yeah. So if you're in the 4 o'clock show, you have to turn that in by like 3.
Yeah.
So that gives you at least 3 is the latest, right? They don't really want you going before after that. So from like 11 to 3, so it's 4 hours to get this story together. That's shooting and then writing. And then my editor edits it together, and then it goes on air at 4. Or if it's 5 o'clock, obviously you have more time. 6 o'clock, you have more time. But that's a typical day. It's every day is different. I think why I like this job is because it's never the same.
So definitely not for procrastinators.
No, although I would say I'm a procrastinator. So I'm always the one like at 2:30, like, oh my gosh, I have to
so
like turn this in.
So maybe it is for procrastinators, right?
Well, if you can thrive, there's people that thrive in that environment, right? And I think honestly, that's why I like this business because I thrive in pressured environments. But at the same time, when you get older, you're like, why am I doing this again? I don't need this thriving in the pressure. But anchors are different. Obviously, we come in a few hours before the show. So on the weekend mornings, it starts at 7, but I get in at 4 and I work with my producer who's been there since 2, writing and doing, because the producer and anchors are like the tag team for a show, right? So the producer's writing and making sure that all the important stories are covered. I come in, I read, and I make sure I rewrite or add stories of my own, book interviews like this one, right? Like, okay, I'm going to have, who do we have? Sometimes we have a food segment, so we do a lot more fun, So I'll be like, okay, we have this chef coming in today. Yay! And then we have, I think, coming up, we have David Lassner coming on to talk about UH. So, and then I prep for the interviews and then that's it. And then 7 to 9, we're live on air and we do the thing. And then after 9 o'clock, I go on and make sure all of those stories are on the website.
Oh.
Yeah, because all the interviews need to be put on the website too. Make sure people see them. Even if you didn't catch it live, you can watch them online.
Yeah. Oh, you did that yourself. I didn't realize. I thought you had like teams of people, just all the interns just huddled over. All right, upload.
I wish. Not in local news.
Yeah.
I used to work in network news, and network definitely has lots of people. Yeah.
Let's wrap up. And I want to thank you so much. A lot of great stuff to share. Just what advice would you give the young professional who maybe is interested or is even looking at a job that has really high pressure environments and all of that?
Well, first of all, I think curiosity. You have to be that person that walks into a room and wonders who's who, who's doing what, who knows who. Like that is the number one thing you have to have in this business, the number one personality trait. If you aren't like that, then don't be in this business. You know what I mean? Like you have to always wonder, be curious. And then second of all, again, you have to have this higher purpose of what can I help people with? Like, for example, in this situation, going back to the example of the labor dispute, it's like, am I giving a voice? Who am I giving a voice to? Who am I helping kind of resolve things? So in that case, it's like a patient, right? A patient who's feeling grief, a patient who's in the middle of something that's beyond their control. And then again, the nurses and then the hospital, right? They're trying to come to terms with their dispute. So again, your skill of what am I trying to solve? What is my purpose? How am I helping people? How am I serving the public, right? Yeah. And then third of all, if you're deadline driven, if you really are kind of like that high that comes with, oh my gosh, I need to go really fast but still be accurate.
Yeah.
That's the challenge, like you don't have time. And once it's out, you can't edit it anymore. It's live, right? So you have to make sure that under all this pressure, you are still accurate.
Yeah.
And everything you say is vetted and not just something you saw online, Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Like, you need to make sure it's from a credible source. And then the rule for us is multiple sources. So you can't just rely on one person because you don't know what their agenda is.
See, so our high school teachers actually were prepping us for life, right?
Yes.
It's like, you need multiple sources. Can't I just do the one?
No, you need to double check it
Yeah.
with different people. Make sure everyone's corroborating the same thing.
Yeah.
And then both sides, because it has to be fair. So all of these things, if you like all of that and you want to do that for the rest of your life, then this is definitely the business for you. But again, it is not a glamorous job. It is not, anchors, you might see them and you think, oh, they're so cool and they're like celebrities, right? But I always I teach at UH too. So I tell my students there, don't go into this business if that's what you want to be. If you just want to be on TV,
Yeah.
like don't do that because you will quickly fail. You'll hate it and you don't get the money that you want. You go be a lawyer, go be something else that makes money, right? Because you have the same skills of writing and talking to people. But in this business, it really is a public service. You're doing it for people.
And how would you do with the competitive nature of it, right? Because there can't be 50 anchors for one show.
Oh, yeah. Well, luckily here in Hawaii, it's not cutthroat, right? It's. I feel like,
But I'm like LA, New York, I'm sure.
those markets, yes. In very top markets, it is very cutthroat, and people can be very ruthless in order to get to the top. But that's like with any industry, right?
Yeah, true.
So as long as you believe in yourself and you know that you can do it, I really am a big believer in, believing in yourself, staying true to yourself, keeping your faith, right? Like if your gut tells you, if you're getting signs that you're being told this is really not something you should be going into, then
Pay attention.
pay attention to them. Don't just do it because your parents told you or whatever. I mean, actually, my mom was like, why do you want to be a reporter? It's always lawyer, doctor, right? For Filipino parents. But again, it's again, if you feel this calling, I like to say it's a calling. Journalism is a calling. It's something that you need to do because you believe in the mission. And if it's not, then you're in the wrong business. And there are people in the business, I know right away when I see them, I'm like, oh, you're not here for the mission. It's more for glamorous. But again, as long as you stay true to yourself.
Oh, I love that. Any last things you want to share with our listeners or viewers?
No, I want to thank you, Malcolm, for giving me the opportunity. And I just wanted to wish everybody out there, good luck in all they do. And I think nowadays it's difficult for young people, right? Especially when there's so much noise coming from all different angles, social media, things that question you and who you are, right? And I think just having the skill to be resilient and to just stay true to yourself, lean on your family, lean on your faith, and I think you'll be fine.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and close. And if you enjoyed today's interview, this podcast episode, please give us a like, comment, subscribe, interact with us. If you want to see Annalisa come on more, make sure she knows so we can force her back on. But this is great.
And
I had
watch
so
Hawaii
much fun.
News Now.
Where can they
I
find
have to give
you?
a plug. I have to give a plug. Hawaii News Now, K5. That is Channel 5, hawaiinewsnow.com, 7 to 9 a.m. Saturdays and Sundays.
Yeah. And if you see her out and about, make sure you say hi.
Yes, please do. I always love it when people say hello.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and close on a short prayer. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you for this blessed fellowship, for this conversation that we know will go out and reach people, for those who are exploring their faith, especially in their professional lives and competitive environments and high-pressure environments. Remind them always that amidst all the noise that you are there with us. Guide us always on the path to your Son, Jesus, so that we may be the best versions of ourselves and serve with a purpose. We thank you for Annalisa, for her family, and for her ministry here in Hawaii. All this we ask in your Son's great name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
In the Father, and Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.